Okay. Aristotle once said that the law is reason free from passion. My interpretation of this claim is that the invention of law was intended to govern over the passions of men, and therefore it will be impossible for these two opposite forces to be connected. The same principle of clarifying opposite concepts which mankind has inadvertently coincided can be applied to economic justice and capitalism. It is my belief that economic justice places unnecessary moral and ethical burdens on an already ethical capitalist society. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of capitalism is an economic system characterized by private or corporate ownership of capital goods by investments that are determined by private decision, prices, production, and the distribution of goods that are determined mainly by competition in the free market. In other words, capitalism is producers, consumers, and investors acting in their own self-interest for perceived benefits. Economic justice, on the other hand, refers to a degree of egalitarianism, to progressive taxation and the redistribution of wealth. Progressive taxation refers to placing higher rates of taxation on certain citizens in society based upon their accumulated wealth. The goal of progressive taxation is to displace the perceived monetary burden of taxation off the poor and onto the affluent. Essentially, the definition of economic justice takes into account the moral and ethical obligations of one human being to another. Capitalism, on the other hand, centers its definition of individual discretion, and so therefore pays no concern to the moral and ethical concerns of society. The goal of economic justice is to ensure the equal opportunity of everyone to succeed in society by providing them with the essential monetary means based upon the assumption that it will fuel their desire and their will to succeed. Capitalism, on the other hand, places all economic decision-making on the individual. And so therefore, a single goal is presumably improbable, seeing as though there is a lack of a major consensus within any capitalist society. So, with the disparity between these two definitions and the goals or lack thereof they impart, how can these two concepts be considered connected other than their abstract relation to economics? This problem reminds me of a toy I once played with as a toddler. It was called a shape sword. And the goal of this toy was to get each individual shape to match its respective hole in the box. Just as it would have been impossible for me to fit a triangular-shaped object in a cylinder-shaped hole without breaking that hole and redefining it entirely, it would be impossible for a person to fit the concept of economic justice into a capitalist society without redefining capitalism entirely. The assertion that people living in a proclaimed capitalist society owe any monetary obligation to their fellow man based upon the assumption, any monetary obligation to their fellow man based upon ethics or morality is imparting a goal on capitalism that by definition cannot have one due to its major lack of consensus. To clarify my argument, the fact that capitalism does not mention charity or other acts of humanitarianism in its definition does not claim that capitalism is against such acts. The definition of capitalism simply implies that philanthropy should be done at individual discretion and it should not be done at a government mandate. And so, one second here. The belief that capitalism and economic justice should coexist in a single society is based upon the assumption that capitalism, by definition, is unethical, and therefore the justification of these unethical practices is presumed necessary through economic justice. But if capitalism were already ethical, the burdens placed upon it by economic justice would seem unnecessary and excessive. So the question is capitalism ethical? As previously stated, capitalism is driven by a variety of self-interest. Therefore, every investment or transaction that is made in a capitalist society is presumed to be done willingly. If a capitalist is always thinking in their own self-interest, it would be unreasonable for any willful transaction between two people to not be of mutual benefit. This is because no one person thinking in their own self-interest would knowingly participate in any transaction that leaves them worse off than they were before or does not benefit them in any way. Put simply, capitalism is fair. Whether it is fair in practice is irrelevant because no society is yet to perfectly conform to the capitalist society. But for the sake of my speech, I will venture into two examples of perfect capitalism and how it is essentially fair. Here's a simple one. Let's say I had an oatmeal raisin cookie, but I desired a chocolate chip cookie. And my brother had a chocolate chip cookie, but desired an oatmeal raisin cookie. What would be the most reasonable and ethical thing for us to do? It would be for me to trade my oatmeal raisin cookie in exchange for my brother's chocolate chip cookie. Is this fair? Yes. In both our minds, we believe that we are better off than we were before. Is this capitalism? Yes. I, in this situation, can be labeled the producer of a desired good. And that desired good is that oatmeal raisin cookie. My brother could be labeled the consumer of that desired good. And the cost to him for that desired good is one chocolate chip cookie. My friends, what is more fair? What is more ethical than capitalism? The assertion that capitalism is unfair comes from a more complex situation. Take the controversy surrounding Walmart, for example. It seems though every time Walmart moves into a small community or town, they wipe out all the small business and mom and pop stores surrounding them. Many people presume this as being unfair because Walmart can nearly outprice or outproduce any other store in the world. This is definitely capitalism, but is it fair? Well, first, in order to accurately answer this question, we have to decide who is responsible for putting people out of business. See, there's a theory in economics called the invisible hand, which states that consumers in a market are much like voters in a political election. One vote for Martin O'Malley is like a vote against Bob Ehrlich, and then vice versa. What are we voting for? We're voting for which firms or companies in the market can most successfully and efficiently produce product while still maximizing consumer surplus. In other words, how much money you save. That's what Walmart does. They save you money. They allow your perceived benefit to surpass your perceived costs. This is why consumers have not only voted to keep Walmart within the market, but also to make it one of the most successful and prosperous institutions in the United States. Because every time you buy a bag of chips or a t-shirt or a pair of shoes from Walmart, that's like a vote for Walmart and a vote against your mom and pop store across the street because you failed to buy that product for them. And if you continuously vote against an institution or a corporation or a firm, that firm will eventually be voted out of the market. So who's responsible? Who's responsible for making Goldman Sachs as prosperous as they are? Who's responsible for making Walmart as big as they are? Who's responsible for making Legg Mason as big as they are? Is it Legg Mason or is it the consumer that purchases their product every single day? Those Occupy Wall Streeter folks should be right here in this classroom because I'm sure each and every one of you has bought something from Walmart. They should be protesting against you. But is it necessarily unfair? No. For what is more ethical than democracy? If you don't want to buy something because you perceive it does not satisfy you, you perceive that the cost is too much, you should have every right not to buy that product. So my friends, capitalism is fair. Capitalism is ethical. Capitalism is good. Thank you.
Nice work.